All right, well, let's get started. I am Meredith Malone. I'm a curator at the Mildred Lane Kemper Art Museum at Washington University in St. Louis. Yesterday, the Outwin American Portraiture Today opened at the Kemper. This is a major exhibition organized by the Smithsonian Institution's National Portrait Gallery, featuring finalists of the 5th triennial Outwin Boochever Portrait Competition. So every 3 years, artists living and working in the United States and Puerto Rico are invited to submit a recent portrait to a panel of jurors chosen by the Portrait Gallery. In 2019, 46 works were selected from over 2,600 entries in a variety of media, including painting, drawing, sculpture, photography, time-based media, and performance art. I am thrilled to be joined today by the first prize winner of the 2019 competition, artist Hugo Crosthwaite, along with Dr. Taína Caragol, the co-curator of the exhibition, for today's Q&A and screening of Hugo's stop-motion drawing animation titled A Portrait of Berenice Sarmiento Chávez that he created in 2018. This conversation marks the first in a series of live online talks with select artists from the Outwin exhibition, which will continue throughout the run of the show until the end of January. Before we get started, I want to first acknowledge that I am speaking with you from St. Louis on the ancestral lands of the Osage Nation, Missouri-Illini Confederacy, and many other tribes who were unjustly removed. We recognize these communities as we live, work, study, and benefit from this occupied land. And now I would like to formally introduce our speakers. Taína Caragol is a curator of painting and sculpture in Latinx art and art history at the National Portrait Gallery. Her scholarship focuses on Latinx and Latin American art and its institutional and market validation, as well as on the recovery of history suppressed by colonialism. Since joining the National Portrait Gallery in 2013, she has significantly increased the representation of Latinx historical figures and artists at the Portrait Gallery through acquisitions for the museum's permanent collection and by curating or co-curating a variety of exhibitions such as One Life, Dolores Huerta, Unseen, Our Past in a New Light, Ken Gonzalez Day and Titus Kaffar, and the Outwin American Portraiture Today. Her upcoming exhibitions include 1898, U.S. Imperial Visions and Revisions, co-curated with Kate Clark-LeMay, and the Outwin 2022, the next version of the competition, which she is directing and co-curating. Taína has a BA in Modern Languages from the University of Puerto Rico, an MA in French Studies from Middlebury College, and a PhD in Art History from the Graduate Center, City University of New York. Hugo Crosthwaite was born in Tijuana, and he spent his formative years in Rosary, Mexico. He has family on both sides of the border, and he graduated from San Diego State University in 1997 with a BA in Applied Arts. Crosthwaite lives and works in San Diego and Rosarito, and he's joining us today from New York City. He works primarily in black and white. He often uses pencil or charcoal to create his figurative compositions that combine portraiture, comic book references, urban signage, commercial facades, and mythology. His stop motion animation, A Portrait of Berenice Sarmiento Chávez, reveals the dreams and experiences of a young woman from Tijuana who immigrates to the United States in pursuit of the American dream. This animation is part of a series based on Crosthwaite's interviews with people who are living in or passing through Tijuana. Hugo's work has been included in numerous solo and group exhibitions throughout the US and Mexico, and his artworks are included in the permanent collections of several art institutions, including Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Orange County Museum of Art, Museum of Contemporary Art, San Diego, and the Museum of Latin American Art, Long Beach, California. And his works are in several private collections around the world. Additionally, before we get started, I'd like to recognize the William T. Kemper Foundation for their generous support, which has made the presentation of this exciting and important exhibition possible at the Kemper Art Museum. I have one last technical note. Our conversation will run for a little bit over an hour. We encourage you all to participate by asking questions in the Q&A feature. Please be aware that we are recording this event as well, and we'll answer as many questions as we can in the second half of the program. Again, I want to thank you both so much for being here today. I'd like to now turn things over to Taína, who's joining us from Washington, DC, who will start us off with some more information about the history and the organization of this exhibition.
Thank you so much, Meredith. Good morning to everyone who has connected to this program today. It is a real pleasure to collaborate with the Mildred Lane Kemper Art Museum on this program and with Hugo Crosthwaite, winner of the Outwin Boochever Portrait Competition 2019. Before I start, I would also like to gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose ancestral lands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area from where I'm speaking today. Meredith, if you could please activate the GIF on this slide. I am really honored to be here with such wonderful collaborators on behalf of Dorothy Moss, director of the Outwin Boochever Portrait Competition 2019, with whom I had the pleasure of co-curating the Outwin American Portraiture Today. And of myself, I want to express how happy we are of being able to share this exhibition with Washington University in St. Louis. And with the larger St. Louis community, we are especially happy to share this show with you due to the presence of artists with strong connections to your city, particularly Adrian Octavius Walker, who is from St. Louis, Kate Capshaw, who grew up just outside the city, as well as Jess T. Duggan, who from 2020 to 2021 was Henry L. and Natalie Freund Teaching Fellow at WUSL. And my special thanks to Dr. Meredith Malone, to Meredith Lehman, and also to Lauren Diamond, and all the museum staff, from the registrars to the conservators, the educators, the guards, who made possible the opening of the exhibition yesterday, and who make the art accessible online and on-site to the public. Kudos for a brilliant audio guide with many voices from different community members. I really encourage you to go to the website and listen to the different interpretations of each artwork, which are so rich and just wonderful to listen to. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, thank you. I feel very fortunate to be here in conversation with Hugo Crosthwaite today. In 2019, Hugo won the Outwin Boochever Portrait Competition with his affecting artwork titled A Portrait of Berenice Sarmiento Chávez. We will delve into that portrait in a moment and hear about the artist's creative process. But before that, I wanted to spend a few minutes giving a general context about the competition and its traveling exhibition. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. The Outwin Boochever Portrait Competition is a flagship initiative of the National Portrait Gallery, established through the generosity of Virginia Outwin Boochever in 2006. Mrs. Bootchiever was a docent at the National Portrait Gallery for almost 20 years. She was a trailblazer as one of the first female commissioned officers in the Navy Waves program in the 1950s. And later, as a diplomatic spouse, she engaged with the local culture and people of the many international cities where she lived, from Belgrade to Paris to Rome. Mrs. Bootchever believed in the power of art and particularly of portraiture to connect us all. And although she passed away a few months before the opening of the first exhibition, sadly, her legacy lives on in this event, of which you're seeing the 5th edition, and which has played, it's a competition that has played a key role in reinvigorating the art of portraiture nationally. We are deeply grateful to Mrs. Bootchever and to the Outwin and Bootchever families for their ongoing commitment to this competition and exhibition. If I can have the next slide, please. Every 3 years, the National Portrait Gallery puts out a nationwide call open to artists around the United States and the 5 territories of the United States to submit their recently created portraits on an online platform. We also compose a panel of 4 distinguished members of the art community nationally, and 3 jurors from the National Portrait Gallery. In 2019, the invited jury was comprised of Byron Kim, Lauren Haynes, Harry Gamboa, and Jefferson Pinder. And the jurors from our staff were Brandon Brain-Fortune, Dorothy Moss, and myself. If I can have the next slide, please. We received thousands of entries. For this particular one, we got 2,675 entries. And they were juried by our internal and external jurors through several rounds until we get to a selection of between 40 and 50 finalists whose works comprise the exhibition. And here you get the stats for the 2019 competition. You see the variety of media, the amount of final artworks in the show, 46 finalists, and the different areas of the country that were represented. If we can go to the next slide. The goal of the competition is to present the exciting and innovative ways in which artists around the country are engaging with the art of portraiture. Each resulting exhibition is a snapshot of the issues that the country is facing socially, culturally, and politically. Each one speaks to the present and to the current debates presented creatively through portraiture. And that is certainly the case, thank you, with the exhibition in your galleries now. Some of the salient topics in this show include the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, the sacrifice of members of the military, the American worker, the experiences of LGBTQ people, Black Lives Matter, and immigration. And it's absolutely powerful to see those topics enlivening the galleries, to see how audiences, how they resonate among audiences, how they resonate with issues that are at the center of our national discourse, and to understand them through the artist's eyes, to see how artists help us process all of those different issues. If we can have the next slide. Okay, and so I am very happy now to give the floor to Hugo Crosthwaite, who will tell us about how a little bit of an introduction on his artwork before we go on to see the actual animation. Hugo.
Thank you very much, Taína, and I'm very happy to be here to be able to speak about my work and to share my work with everybody here at the Kemper Museum. I'm really excited. Well, very briefly, I just like to introduce what this portrait is about. No, it's a stop motion drawing animation, and it's the story of Berenice Sarmiento Chávez. Berenice is somebody who I met, well, I think it would be now 5 years ago. Part of my practice living in Tijuana, part of the time where I work, is that I go into the street, into downtown Tijuana, and I go with my sketchbook, you know, and I just draw faces. You know, I draw faces, and through those drawings, you know, I start creating narratives. You know? And so then I sit there in the middle of the street and I'm drawing faces, and then at some point, you know, I saw Berenice and I was drawing her, and she saw me, and you know, she came up to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm drawing a little portrait," and I showed her my sketchbook, and that's always wonderful, you know, that this conversation starts to happen. You know, I started telling her my story, so then she told me her story, and when I heard her story, it made a really deep impression. You know, it was this whole story about how she tried to cross into the United States, made it. Got a job, got into trouble, got deported, and was trying to come back into the United States. And it was it had all these elements of a whole epic, you know, an adventure, but then also a tragedy, and a lot of exaggeration. So then when I heard this, I thought, well, a lot of it might not be true, but it doesn't matter. Like, she was telling me this story, and it just and to me, when I was hearing it, it was just fantastic. You know? So then later on, I was working on this project called Tijuana Bibles, and out of that, the story of Berenice kept you know, kept it in my mind. And then when I got the opportunity to participate, when I heard about this competition, I wanted to do the portrait of Berenice Sarmiento Chávez, her story as her portrait. So if we could move forward, we could show you what the portrait is.
Okay, if I may have sharing privileges, please. Okay, let's see. Yes, thank you.
Well, that was the portrait. That was the video that I presented. And one of the wonderful things about this project is that doing these portrait animations, these stop motion drawing animations, I'm able to show the improvisational aspect of my drawing, which is what you're seeing on the screen is exactly the way I handle all my work. It's this improvisation that happens on the page where I start with the face, and then from that I draw the body and then start creating a narrative as I go along. So then it's a way of just stringing together details, and by that process creating a story. So then when I was thinking about Berenice, I did this project 3 years after I had met Berenice. And unfortunately, I do not know what happened to Berenice. I don't know where she is. I don't know if she tried to go back to the United States. I haven't heard from her. But her story was just ingrained in my head. No? So then I wanted to tell her story precisely as a portraiture, not necessarily the likeness of her, not necessarily the appearance of her, but I felt that her story was her portrait. We all have our stories. Sometimes these stories define us. We look at ourselves in the mirror in the morning, and we come up with stories of ourselves. I'm a good person. I'm a father, and all this. So then, that's sometimes the way we want to present ourselves, and the way Berenice presented herself to me was through this story. Which, as you can see in the video, it had a lot of exaggeration. Like she said that she crossed, that everybody died in her group when they were crossing. She was the only one who survived. Then she got to this cushy job in San Diego, and then got into trouble. And then somebody came in and shot her in the face. But of course, when I was talking to her, there was no scarring in her face. There was no real evidence of anything that she was telling me was true. But that was the story that she wanted to tell me, as somebody who I'm sure she suffered, or she went through tribulations, but she wanted to present herself as this very heroic figure. And to me, her story was, moved me so much that I felt, well, this is the story of migrants and refugees. Like, they go through these terrible, intense things, and a way they cope with it is by telling the story, and sometimes you embellish those stories because a way of making yourself a hero. At times when everything is against you, the way you move forward, the way you fight is that well, I am the hero of my story, and I will survive, and I will triumph at the end. And hopefully I pray that Berenice is safe and happy and working and somewhere where she's happy, but at least that story that she told me, I wanted to present it to the public, this her narrative, and I got this opportunity to do it through this portrait. Now, of course, once I did the drawing and I developed the story, this being an audio visual project, well, you have to come up with the sound, with the sound of what is gonna fit, the animation. So then, luckily enough, part of my practice also, me just drawing with people, sometimes I record sounds from the city. And at some point, I was taking the bus from Tijuana back to San Diego, and Rosa, this woman, came into the bus with a little guitar, and she started playing, playing for change money, for money. Could you please give me, $1 or something? And she would play a song. And when I heard her voice, and she had this really raspy, intense voice. So then when she got close to me, I said, I would like to record you. Could you sing me a song, whatever song you want, and I'll give you, and I think I looked into my pocket and I had $30. So I'll give you $30 if you could sing me a song, and I'll just record it. And she was like, well, $30, yes. What do you want me to sing? Whatever you want. I'm just gonna start recording. So then I started recording, and she sang the song that you hear in the video. And at first, the way she sings is very, monotonous, and then just stringing the guitar, and that intense voice. And I didn't realize that I couldn't even recognize the song. but I didn't realize that the song is a very famous song called entitled Bohemio de Afición, which means Bohemian by hobby. And this is Berenice, this is Rosa, a woman playing this song. And that song, the lyrics of that song are very manly, very a lot of misogyny in the song. It's about a man who conquers women and drinks and so then to me the fact that Rosa chose that song and presented herself also with this very strong, heroic, manly, macho, way, I felt that is the perfect sound for Berenice's story, which also she had presented herself to me as this heroic, epic figure, that went and suffered and survived. So then those two things just happened by coincidence, by chance. But then those are the things that happen when you're improvising work. Wonderful things happen, and you're able to unite them, and that happened with this project. With the animation, with her story, and then with the sound and the singing of Rosa. So yes.
Thank you, Hugo, for providing all that context. I think something that's incredible that happens in the process of jurying an Outwin is that the most striking works rise to the top at the moment of awarding the prizes. And it was so clear for all the members of the jury that that your work was the first prize, was going to be the first prize winner. It was just, a unanimous decision, and one that was natural at the end of the day, when we came to that part of the process. And I think it's because your work marries perfectly this storytelling of a very timely story. It humanizes a political issue that is so often just a hot button issue, that polarizes, that certainly in the last 4 years polarized the country a lot. But it brought humanity to that story. And there was something incredibly special to your graphic storytelling, to the iconography you use, to the alternation of bright moments with dark ones in the story of Berenice. And then that incredible soundtrack, yes. And that was just, it was clearly a first prize winning piece. And knowing your work, knowing the different media that you engage with, and the different scales. You're someone who goes from very small scale. You were talking about your sketchbook before and how integral it is to your everyday practice, to really large scale. And we're going to see later on some of your mural work. I wonder how you chose this particular format of the animation to be the one to tell the story of Berenice. Why were you convinced that this was the way that this was the medium to tell the story?
Well, it was precisely because her story to me had many elements, was grand in a way that I felt a drawing, her likeness, Berenice's likeness would not suffice, especially when the story might have been fake or might have been a lie, because for example, yes, you could she is a migrant, she did cross, she did suffer many things, but the way she told me the story, getting shot in the face, at some point she was telling me she was so beautiful that she attracted the attention of of men, and that got her into trouble. Yes, you could see a lot of exaggeration, and of course the only way you could play this, like the idea of how her mind is thinking, how her story is, how she wants to present herself to me, not as a physical being, but as this conceptual idea of a hero, I felt, well, yes, of course, a likeness, a drawing, a portrait is not going to be suffice. There's all these elements to that story that need to be expressed. So then I felt, yes, time-based media, like something that tells a narrative, that has the arc of a story, the way she told it to me, I had dreams of I was sitting, I had the American dream, but then to me it translates as this, as death, kind of like inspiring her to go, to this adventure, which is usually what happens, this sense of danger, because it is dangerous to cross the border illegally. So then all those elements had to be part of the portrait. The fact that she was the only one who survived in her team, which is also highly unlikely. But that's the way she wanted to present herself, as I'm the sole survivor of this whole team of women that tried to cross into the United States. And she was the only one who made it. And then all these elements had to be expressed. It would not have worked if it was just like this single drawing, portrait. It had to have all these elements of fantasy, and then also how, even in the video itself, her age changes. And so then that's also part of
something absolutely beautiful, because at the end she looks so much like a young girl, and there's an element of illusion, of innocence also, that is apparent in her face. And speaking about that aspect of humanizing the story, could you speak a little bit more about that in your work, about and your whole trajectory working on that issue, and which also implies addressing outside perspectives of the place where you were born? And maybe we can look at some of your earlier work. Perhaps we can go to the next slide here.
Well, a lot of my work, I was born in Tijuana. I lived my youth in Tijuana and Rosarito Beach, and then I became an artist. And at the beginning, well, my work was more about just focusing on drawing and the beauty of drawing and line and the craftsmanship of creating stories. But then, of course, I got the opportunity to live in the United States. I lived 7 years in Brooklyn, New York, 2 years in Atlanta, Georgia. I've spent some time in Chicago. And as a Mexican-American artist, when I lived in the United States, especially in Atlanta, Georgia, and New York, finally you get this kind of like clash of culture, and at home you're comfortable. In Tijuana, I'm happy, where things are. But then when I moved to the United States, my language, the fact that my first language is Spanish, and the fact that I come from Tijuana made a really impact for me and how people saw me as a Mexican artist. People would, when I would tell them that I come from Mexico and I'm an artist, people would always assume that I'm from Mexico City. But then when I would tell them, no, I actually come from Tijuana, the first thing they would say to me was, oh, Tijuana, I got so drunk in Tijuana, and that kind of conversation. So then it always made me laugh to think how the area of Tijuana, the city of Tijuana itself, as a border city, has this connotation of lawlessness. So then one of the projects that I started to work on was this notion of the Tijuana Bible. The Tijuana Bible is an American invention. It's something that developed in Chicago during Prohibition, and there were these small little cartoon zines, I guess, from the 1920s, from the 1930s. They happened during Prohibition, and they were part of the speakeasy culture, of this underground criminal culture. And what they would have is like they would have images of Mickey Mouse having sex with Donald Duck, and that kind of thing. So then, a friend of mine showed me these, and he said, these are entitled. These were called Tijuana Bibles, and they were 5 cents, and you could get them, at these speakeasies. And I loved that idea of the Tijuana Bible, like always, at least for the for people in Chicago, for Americans, this notion that vice comes from elsewhere. It's never homegrown. It always comes from someplace else. And the fact that these little comic books in English with American characters came from Tijuana, it made no sense to read, but it was really funny, this dichotomy of the notion of this is something that's sacred and profane. The Bible is sacred, Tijuana is the profane part. So then, as a Tijuana artist, I I really enjoyed this notion, and I said, well, I as a Tijuana artist, I want to take back that concept of the Tijuana Bible and make it my own as a Tijuana artist, present a Tijuana Bible to the United States or to anyone as something coming from Tijuana. So then to me, seeing Donald Duck having sex with, with Mickey Mouse doesn't offend me. But what does offend me is, immigration policies that affect my people and affect friends that I know in Tijuana. So then I decided to do my interpretation of the Tijuana Bible, where I basically grabbed the same format of those original Tijuana Bibles and made them into these books. Through these books, it would tell the story, just like the old Tijuana Bibles, but in this case, it would tell stories of life in Tijuana, immigration issues of transculturization, of gentrification, of all these things that that I felt were important to tell. So then, part of the process of creating these books, I came up with this notion of the stop motion animation, where I would it would be a video where you would see a page and a drawing would start developing, and it seemed kind of magical, no? Like precisely the Bible. Usually, people think that it's word directly written by God, no, or it's inspired by God, and it has no human hand, no, it's sacred, no, a sacred text. So then the image would appear magically on the page, and you would only see my hand turn the page as if I was a prophet, no. So then that's the way I presented the Tijuana Bible, and I would screen them as these also sacred and profane kind of installations. So here you're seeing an image of me presenting the Tijuana Bible at Mana Miami, where I did it as a peep show. Like kind of you come in and it has this kind of like feel of, oh, you're gonna see something, indecent or something like that. But you come in and you're seeing immigration issues, you're seeing issues of the border, you're seeing the lives of people and the humanizing of Tijuana. No? So then I kept playing with this dichotomy of the sacred and the profane. I think yes. So here you get an example, an image of the book of the actual book of drawings. It's the cover with eight pages, and they tell stories about how the United States sees Mexico, how I was thought of as a Tijuana artist when I was outside of Tijuana, when I was in New York and Atlanta, Georgia, how people thought that my work should be. Like, oh, you're a Mexican artist, so then it's Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, color and folklore and all this. And here I was presenting work that's basically a new type of folklorism, the opposite of Mexican folklorism. It's black and white, telling stories, and no color, but just telling these narratives that are important to me. We can go to the next page. Thank you. So then these issues of the border, that are being placed in my version of the Tijuana Bibles, where you deal with racism, where you deal with this idea of a border where, I remember growing up in Tijuana in the 1970s, and you could come back and forth the border like no problem. No, I had family on both sides of the border. My father was born in San Diego, just by the very fact that there was the hospital there, and there was no real intention for him to become an American citizen, being born in the United States. It was just that the hospital was there. So then, families would come and go, and he was born in San Diego, and by fate, he was an American citizen. And also now I'm an American citizen also, because I'm the son of an American citizen. So the fact that the border basically was not really there, or was not an issue, until after 2001, after 9/11, where the border became militarized, when this notion of, this is a border and we need to protect the United States against foreign nations, against enemies. And they started seeing Tijuana as an enemy, so then that's one of the things that you see in this image. You see this idea of like, if it was a battlefield, and you see this border and this notion of, a woman soldier and a Mexican soldier, like and these culture, two cultures that are enemies in a sense, no? Or the way of precisely this American exceptionalism, that the United States is unique and freedom loving and democracy, and Mexico is a corrupt country, and we need to protect Americans from Mexico. Those issues was drawing them in this very cartoon-like style, similar to the original Tijuana Bibles, but in this case presenting issues that that keep me up at night, as a Mexican American.
Right. I love here the appropriation of American superheroes, and also of the iconography of the comic book, right? Especially with the representation of women as these sexualized, you know, fabulous beings that are also, you know, able to, you know, just carry weapons and fight, and the hyperbole that is in here to tell that story of the border and of that tense relationship of the United States with Mexico, as portrayed in politics, really, and instrumentalized by politicians. If we can get the next slide, please. Hugo, do you want to introduce the animation?
Well, this is well, let me see. So that was like a little preview of my Tijuana Bibles, and there you can see how kind of like how the video looked. You know, like it was this page, and then you would see my hand, and you would see the drawing kind of develop, and I would turn the page, and stories of you know of what I wanted to tell through the Tijuana Bibles would appear. The original Tijuana Bibles, they're about 5 minutes each, the videos, and the purpose of my intention of this project is to do seven Tijuana Bible books and 7 videos. And then at some point, I would like to do in the future an installation of 7 Tijuana Bible peep shows, where I was thinking also of this idea of the dichotomy of, you know, the sacred and the profane. It could be kind of like confessional. You know, I'm very Catholic, so then I thought about the confessional that also turns into a peep show that shows the sacred book that deals with issues of the border, you know, and the Tijuana Bible. No? So then I have like 4 finished, and I'm still working on 3 more. So hopefully soon I'll have those. And part of that is just, you know, like me playing with these narratives that are improvised on the page, but then also in public spaces. These are photographs. These are images of a project that I did for Liberty Station in San Diego, where I was invited. It was an open call for public installations that were going to be temporary. So then, you know, my work is very improvised, as you can see through my drawing, how I improvise on the page. So then when I work with muralism, I can never promise what I'm going to do. Like, I don't do any preparatory sketches. I don't have, you know, proposals. I basically just say, I'm gonna start drawing, and you should trust my draftsmanship. You know, that to hope that it's good, and I know it's gonna be good. But I can never really show anybody beforehand what I'm going to do, and that's why I felt, well, you know, and a mural that's going to be you know, destroyed in the end, because these projects were supposed to be temporary. Then, you know, whatever happens in the end is not permanent. You know, I can do my narratives, and in the end they will be gone. So then so there's no real commitment, you know, from the place. So then but they love the idea. Like, I proposed to them that I would do this as muralism as performance, where I would be there for 2 weeks wearing this shirt where it says Hugo Rótulos. Rótulos means a sign painter. So then I would be there for 2 weeks painting on the wall, and people would not know if I was an artist. They would think I was some sort of craftsman, or that I was hired by the artist to do this, because, you know, I had this shirt that says Hugo Rótulos. So then the whole mystifying aspect of, oh, the artist is here creating an artwork is gone. So then that would allow me for people to just come close to me and, you know, talk to me. They would say, you know, how much are they paying you for this? And it looks beautiful and all this. And that conversation would start, which is similar to my process of just having the sketchbook in Tijuana and drawing and having these conversations with people. So then what I wanted to do was just in the place, which is a very beautiful art complex which is also with beautiful restaurants, and, you know, and families go there, and you know, and very affluent people gather and, you know, drink and eat and, you know, have a wonderful time. I was talking to people, and I was drawing, and during that time also the separation of children from families at the border was happening. You know, that was something that was really upsetting me. This idea of how you know, the United States proclaiming to be a democratic and, you know, and freedom loving, but here they were at the border separating kids from their families, something that hadn't happened since, you know, like the Holocaust in Germany or something like that. No, it was horrific for me to think of that and to see those images. So then, and being in a place that was very family oriented, I decided, well, you know, families are being separated at the border, and here are families enjoying, you know, life, you know, in the United States, you know, with freedom, and, you know, so then I decided to portray what was happening at the border with these families. I was drawing migrant families and the columns and notions of separation, but then also notions of immigration and their hopes and dreams, and humanizing this aspect to the park, no? And that's one of the things, no, that that was very wonderful to happen. The beauty of craftsmanship, of good craftsmanship, of draftsmanship, of the beauty of craft and drawing, no? Which you can handle any topic, political or whatever, if it's done in a beautiful way, if it's presented in an eloquent way, people respond to it. You know, they, no matter the politics, people would come to me and they would say, "Oh my God, these are beautiful," and this and what's going on, and I would talk to them. Well, this is, you know, this is our family, and, you know, the image of, you know, of the bird, you know, something that's migratory, that has no borders and is freedom. But then here these families are trying to echo that, and so then we would have this conversation, you know, a very apolitical, humanizing conversation of what was happening at the border, you know, of real separations. And of course, you know, it doesn't matter what politics you are against what's happening at the border, kids being put in cages and all this. It is abhorrent, you know, it's terrible. So then it was wonderful that, you know, independently of the politics of the time, I was doing these narratives, and people would respond to them because it was a beautiful image, and then also the fact that I was there and was, you know, had this opportunity to converse with people. In the end, I was supposed to erase the mural, but then the Liberty Station people said, you know, could you keep it? And at this point, it's been almost 3 years, and it's still there, no? And I haven't returned to erase. It's supposed to be it's supposed to be a temporary piece, but so far, but at this point, even Liberty Station is thinking of keeping it permanent and acquiring it.
And that is so amazing that an ephemeral artwork became a permanent one, and it really speaks to the power of the work. Hugo, I'm sorry to cut you off. Actually, I wanted to see if we could go to the next slide and also leave a little bit of time for our audience's questions. But before that, maybe you could tell us something about this last work that we're going to see.
Well, this one's entitled Sopanti. It's also a stop motion drawing animation, and also it deals with the caravans of people that are coming, especially the unaccompanied minors that are crossing the border into the United States. And so then, to me, this it's a brief stop motion drawing animation. It's kind of my prayer for their safety and for their you know, success, I guess. Yes. So yes, so then what you're seeing is precisely these images of the Sopanti, which in Tenochtitlan, in the Aztec culture, were these skulls that were sacrifices, you know, to Huitzilopochtli, and, you know, but then they were seeing, you know, there was a different notion of death. No, it was more of elevating these people to this, you know, to this higher plane of, you know, of gods even. No? So then to me, it was this prayer for these children that are, you know, that are very vulnerable, and they're crossing the border unaccompanied, and and the dangers that they go through, even just as they're crossing through Mexico itself. So then, and then what you're hearing in the background is a Catholic Rosary, which I also felt like that beautiful voice, singing the introductions to the prayers, and then the actual prayers of the Rosary. I felt to me it was like this, very devotional, and for me, at least in my sense, a prayer for their safety.
That is so beautiful, and I love the syncretism of the image, the
Yes.
work. So I think Meredith, Dr. Meredith Malone will come in as a moderator now.
There we go. Thank you both for a great conversation. Yeah, well, now we'll be happy to answer some questions if you want to add some into the Q&A. Well, we do have one that's popped up. You answered one already, but about your terrific soundtracks that go with your work. One was a question about the media that you're using in your animation, the Berenice animation. If you could say a little bit more about the materials that you're actually using to make the drawings, and maybe a little bit more about the process too.
Well, I'm not a real filmmaker. I'm not a real animator. Basically, what I do is just improvise these drawings on a page. So then the way I work is just with a white sheet of paper. I'm just drawing. I would just be creating drawings on a page, and then with a little Canon power shot, that's what I would take a picture. So then I would draw another detail, and I would take a picture, and all, in a funny way, is kind of handheld stop motion drawing animation, which in the end, it has this kind of, like shaky quality to it, which I felt it added to the, cinema verita kind of thing, which, I know nothing about, but at least in this animation, it had the sense of, telling a story through a process of a drawing that's happening in real time, and I'm improvising the drawing, and you get to see, like, the tension that what you see, or what's going to happen next, the excitement of what's going to happen next in the drawing is the same excitement that I'm having as I'm drawing, So then there's this process of creating a narrative in a very improvisational way. So it's all pen and ink, and acrylic paint on white paper, and at the end of a sequence, I have like maybe 1,400 photographs. So then I put all those photographs into a USB and give them to my partner, Teresa Magario, and then she in Premiere puts it all together and kind of makes the animation run smoothly. And then Teresa and I, we've had this practice of recording sounds from the city. We go to the cathedral, we go to downtown, on the bus, wherever we find something that could work as a soundtrack of a video. We just record it with our iPhone, So then in the end, it's all improvised. Nothing's really planned. But then I think it works really nicely, just coming the sound together with the image, and then you tell the story. And I was so fortunate. At some point, I got invited to participate in Festival de Morelia, an actual film festival, with one of my films, and it was really crazy because Teresa and I we're not really filmmakers, we're just artists creating drawings and putting sounds together. But then there I was, surrounded by directors who actually were telling me, oh, what camera did you choose, what this and whatever, all the editing and Final Cut Pro and all this, and I was like, yes. I used my little Canon and my little laptop, So but that's the thing also, like I remember Steven Spielberg saying, the technology is gonna help us, be able to make film, be able to create stories. It's not necessarily how big the equipment or all this. It's about being able to tell stories that are compelling, and through this stop motion drawing animation, I found a way to tell stories, in the most basic, simplest way, just through drawing and taking photographs.
And Hugo, there was another question too, just a little bit about if you could talk about how long, you've been working as an artist, maybe how long how your practice maybe evolved.
Well, I've been drawing all my life. All my life I've been drawing, but being an artist, really, I started when I was 27 years old, like maybe 20 years ago. And it's because growing up in Tijuana, I had no notion of art or being an artist. I knew I wanted to draw, but I didn't know where to go with that, So then I remember in high school, a counselor told me, oh, Hugo, if you're interested in drawing, you could study architecture or graphic design. And architecture had math, so then I went into graphic design. And of course, when I started studying graphic design, it had no drawing in it. It was all computer, Photoshop, sitting in a computer and working. And it wasn't the act of drawing or creating a drawing. So then I hated it. But my father wanted me to get, I was first generation in my family to get a degree. So then I asked the counselor at San Diego State University, what could I do with all the classes that I've taken for me to get a degree? And she proposed to me, Hugo, if you take a whole semester of art history, you can get this degree in applied arts and sciences, which to this date I have no idea what it is, but it's a degree. So then I studied art history for the last semester at school, and that changed my life. Like finally I studied about art, I read about art, I had to go to museums and write about art. And that's when I decided, graphic design definitely is not what I want. This is what I want to do, drawing and painting and telling my own stories. And so then, I that's like, I had the epiphany, this is what I want to do. So then I got my degree in applied arts and sciences and went back to Tijuana and then started drawing. And I convinced my father, now I'm an artist, which was hard for him to hear. But I had the degree, I kept my promise, and I just started working. Now with this intention of creating a body of work and develop technique. And actually, once you convince yourself of something, then it doesn't actually take that long to develop a body of work or to, drawing like anything, practice, you get better at it. So then you dedicate a year to something and, you'll get good. So then I started drawing and creating work, and then a career just started developing. My work has been opening the doors for me. So then I would do work and I would get invited to this show in Tijuana. I would show in Tijuana in place de Rosarito, and then I got to show in San Diego, and then Los Angeles, New York, Miami, Chicago, and little by little, a profession starts developing as an artist.
Hugo, is the drawing just a daily practice for you? Do you still use your sketchbook and are you drawing people you see on the streets every day?
I try to, yes. Well, I always carry my sketchbook and I'm always drawing, and that's part of. I think it's very basic, as a visual artist to know how to draw, to be able to create this, to be able to translate abstract ideas into an image. It's very important. And it's very fulfilling for me, So then, yes, I always carry my sketchbook and draw and improvise drawings and improvise narratives that later on it can develop into something else, maybe a stop motion drawing animation or a large mural. But yes, drawing is essential every day.
And I had one more question, sort of for both of you. Hugo, you had talked a little bit about the genesis of your prize-winning animation and how it's, to a certain extent, stretching, traditional notions of portraiture. I wonder if, Taína, if you might say a little bit about how loosely portraiture is defined in this competition, or maybe how it has evolved over the years. I know that's a question that I think some visitors have brought up with me, even yesterday when the show just opened.
That's a wonderful question. Thank you, Meredith. Well, the competition itself strives to broaden the definition of portraiture. So we are very welcoming of entries that are grounded in portraiture, but think outside the conventions of the genre. And this is, Hugo's work is a very, very powerful example of that. Many people think of portraiture traditionally as a static image of someone fixed in time. And one of the very powerful works of Berenice, of the portrait of Berenice Sarmiento Chávez, is that there is a trajectory that is captured, that it's the story of the person as her portrait, as Hugo was saying before, and that you see her through time in her own, through her own account, as interpreted also by the artist. Something that is very interesting to me too is that and I think to all the jurors, it was the fact that the hand of the artist is so apparent. And when you think about the tradition of portraiture, you don't always think about the hand of the artist. You know, very often, if you think about, you know, painting on canvas, oil on canvas portraiture, about you know, 18, 19, even many 20th century portraits, at least the ones that strive to be representations in a realist tradition, very often that the hand of the artist is not immediately apparent. And Hugo does exactly the opposite by taking you from scene to scene, by showing you how he constructs the narrative with a gesture as simple as blanking, you know, as erasing all the image with white paint or with black paint, adding new elements, adding new shades, adding new objects into the composition. And so that is really just a great example of that definition of expanding the tradition of portraiture. I think if you look at the 5 competitions that we've had, you see a trend of more of audacity that goes in crescendo through the different iterations. And and that goes by nature. You know, for example, the very first competition was limited to painting and sculpture. And then the second one included other media. And progressively, you know, this year for the 2022 edition, which is in the making, and it's going to be very exciting, there were more time-based media entries than ever before, for example. And there were some very innovative, approaches to portraiture through media that you would never imagine, you know, or you would never pop into your head as part of the tradition. So that is very exciting. That is fascinating. Institutionally, for the National Portrait Gallery, it just signals that that we are a place with a past, a present, and a future. Really, people, you know, as we show these examples of historical portraiture and of new portraiture, I think people will be stimulated and they will see themselves, you know, in that tradition and find it exciting.
I'd like to ask just one. We're up against the end of our hour here, but Hugo, if you'll take one more question from the audience. There was a question that asks if you engage in other modes of storytelling outside of visual arts.
No, not really. It's just drawing is my life. You know, drawing in my sketchbook, and this is what I do. You know, like this is the way. You know, like I'm not really eloquent with speaking or writing, and not really. Drawing is my eloquence. Drawing is my craft, and that's the way I'm able to tell stories and compose things, which also happen in this very improvisational way. But then also the act of drawing is time, you know, consuming. You know, it gives you time to think. It gives you time to develop ideas and kind of focus ideas. Something that speech for me, or you know. One way or another when I talk, but when I draw, I feel like I have the time to be eloquent and to compose things and to create stories that you know that I love and that I hate. You know, which is usually what an artist does. So you never, you know, you either draw what you love, you know, or you draw what you hate. And through these process of creating narratives as I improvise, I'm able to tell those stories. You know, things that keep me up at night or things that I'm joyful about. But it all happens beautifully, you know, through this craftsmanship of drawing, which is something that I feel is universal, no? Independently of language or anything, or even with this idea of the stop motion drawing animation portrait. You might see a likeness, and 200 years from now, the story might not be there. The likeness is there. Who was this person? You might not really know. It's all, you know, maybe there's something written or whatever, but through this time-based media, you're able to focus on the narrative, and independently of the person, their story will survive. You know, what happened to them, at least with Berenice. I don't know where she is. I don't know what she looks like now, but her story is, for me, so important, and it's being told to this stop motion drawing animation, and I hope that that will survive for generations, and it will transcend borders. It will transcend nations, cultures, language. A very human story.
Yeah, and we're thrilled to be able to show it at the Kemper Ugo. So I want to thank you and Taína both for a wonderful conversation and for sharing all these wonderful insights into your practice. And Taína, yeah, we look forward to hearing about the next iteration of the Outwin in 2022.
Yes, stay tuned. The show is opening at the end of April of next year. And thank you so much for the invitation. Again, we're delighted to collaborate with you. The show looks fantastic there. I've seen some pictures, and I wish so much I could see it in person.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Me too. Yeah, thank you both.